So I want to give my experience of upgrading from Svelte 4 to Svelte 5. And I'm going to actually provide more of a sort of a philosophical approach to this rather than a technical one, just to see what people think, put my ideas out there. So I wrote this blog post and I'll link it down below, but I'll just run through it. I won't read it word for words, but I'll just provide like my thoughts and ideas, maybe even more things on top of that on what I've written. But the first thing I want to kind of talk about is that upgrading is important, but why it's so difficult. So I think the number one kind of, I wouldn't say a barrier, but an issue is a lot of us, we program for businesses. You know, software is a vital part of the business. And if you're working for a business, you'll know that businesses have requirements. And generally the requirements are to obviously make income, so you can pay the employees, but also survive as a business and to grow as a business. And that's how you remain competitive in the capitalistic environment. So generally, the idea of updating your Svelte packages, or I'll put that under the umbrella of refactoring, is generally not directly involved with those business requirements. Like if you're thinking about these business requirements to a non-technical person, they're thinking about building new features to serve your users and to remain competitive, but also fixing any bugs or making sure your application doesn't go down. These are kind of like the three sort of really important things to focus on in software development from a non-technical perspective. But that's where upgrading your Svelte packages or refactoring, it's not directly involved in those requirements, but I want to kind of make the case that it actually is indirectly. But I'll come to that in a second. I just want to run through the negatives of upgrading. But another negative, which is kind of similar to what I talked about just then, is if you're introducing change into the code base, that's obviously introducing risk, right? And when you introduce risk, that can mean your application goes down, or you've had a change in how the behavior of a web application that affects how users use it negatively. So that's where if you were to introduce these risks, you'd rather be via code changes, is you would rather be fixing bugs or incorporating new features rather than upgrading a package. And that's why upgrading is so difficult, because of these kind of issues and problems. Another reason is if you're upgrading, so the example is from Svelte 4 to Svelte 5, and I know the Svelte core team did an absolutely fantastic job making Svelte 4 back compatible for Svelte 5, but the problem is if you upgrade to Svelte 5, then users have to, your team, who isn't involved in the upgrade, has to learn new syntax, so they've got to change their ways, and a lot of people, when they do their work, they want to be able to just do their work, not have to worry about the ever-changing landscape of web development. So by upgrading, you're introducing headaches to the rest of your team when you don't really need to. So those are the kind of reasons I believe upgrading is difficult. Now, where I talk about how this is indirectly serving the business requirements, is that if we were never to upgrade, then you have the short-term stability, right? You can build your features, and you can build your features. You can fix your bugs and your application is stable, right? The best thing is to do nothing, generally. When you do something, you always introduce risk. But what you might find is you're trading your short-term stability for like a long-term decay. So over time, just due to the nature of the web and web development, things like software, it slowly decays over time because things change, the environment changes, the dependencies change. And you can imagine if we're using Svelte 4 2 years down the track, the documentation has changed, how people do things has changed. So if we come across a problem, we try and Google that problem and try and find out how someone else solved that problem. We'll get like a Svelte 6 version or a Svelte 5 version versus we're on Svelte 4. Another thing is if we use other packages or other dependencies, they can only be compatible with Svelte 5, for example. And we did kind of, when we're doing this upgrade, we did find that a lot of our packages to be maintained up to date, we were stuck on kind of worse versions because we couldn't upgrade to Svelte 5. So these are things you trade off if you don't upgrade, the kind of the slow decay process. And I kind of want to hijack an idea from a book that I'm reading. It's called Refactoring by Martin Fowler. And he talks about how the book is about refactoring, not really upgrades, but I kind of latch upgrading into that umbrella. And there's a cool graph, which I just replicated here, where initially when you build a new feature, you should always be refactoring. Kind of coming to our case, we do take a hit in kind of feature output by upgrading. So you take this initial kind of hit, but then you're able to, with good design, still keep producing features over time. As opposed to if you're just kind of spinning the wheels, you'll get a lot of features out early, and then eventually it gets harder and harder to build those features, and that's without refactoring or without upgrading. So that's the case with us, right? If we just keep going on the track of building features and not doing any upgrades, then eventually we'll hit a wall where we're just too out of date. So that's kind of the reason to upgrade. And because of this graph, it kind of serves a business purpose, right? You may not see it initially if you're short-sighted, but if you see that long-term vision of refactoring, updating your packages, then it's going to serve the business requirements because you're able to build features much better. You've got a better developer experience. I know that's something I really want to make important, is that books like refactoring, it's not about making code look good. It's about being able to organize the code in a way that allows you to build and deliver features better in the future. And that's really important. So the idea is, it's like running a marathon, right? You wouldn't sprint a marathon. You'd take your pace, take your time. That allows you to go the extra mile rather than sprinting all the way. So that's kind of the same approach we want to take to software development. And that's why I think upgrading is really important for those reasons. Now coming into how we did the upgrade. So I think Svelte 5 was released back in October 2024. We're in June 2025. So we did take our time on upgrading. As you know, like another risk of upgrading is when you go to the latest version, you're kind of on the bleeding edge. Generally, how the software cycles are released, things are usually stable before release, and then you got the nightly version or the very main, right? So obviously there's a Svelte 5 release proper, and then we obviously started developing on the background. We're not going to the latest updates, but something that's stable at least. So I believe when they did the release of Svelte 5, that they did it on a live stream in a Svelte Summit video, which I thought was pretty cool. But our initial attempts, so we made 3 attempts to upgrade to Svelte 5. So the first 2 attempts, we used the migration guide and the migration script. So you can run the script, but the problem was it led to too many changes in the pull request. And you can imagine if you're trying to review that pull request, it's going to be a nightmare. So too many changes for one thing. Another thing is, even though there's back compatibility, it changed most of our components from Svelte 4 to Svelte 5. It caused a lot of bugs, which will make it really hard to test, and it's just not feasible to test the entire application. We tried that twice. So we did one branch, ditched that branch, did another branch, ditched that branch. Then we tried a third time. Third time's the charm. We focused on just changing the version number from 4 to 5. So when we did that, compatibility, so we did Svelte 4 to 5, ran npm install, and then it was just dominoes from there. Then you'll find out some packages that we had to remove or replace, some third-party packages, especially most of the formatting libraries need to be upgraded. Then our strategy from there was to figure out what we could do to minimize the size of the pull request. So that's another thing that's probably worth another blog post, is a book that I read recently, Accelerate, by Dr. Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim. So I think Gene Kim also wrote a book called The Phoenix Project, which I think is really good. So the idea behind Accelerate, or one of my key takeaways was you want to, and Martin Fowler also provides a forward for this, so you want to minimize the size of your pull requests. You want to have small pull requests and try to avoid big feature branches. So for example, a big feature branch would be our Svelte 5 application as a feature branch, right? We want to try and minimize that by breaking it into small pull requests. So the idea is kind of, this Atlassian article here, so I'll link all this. This is the idea of trunk-based development rather than feature-based or feature development, which can't be achieved all the time. Like, for example, we can't release parts we have to release Svelte 5 as a big chunk with other packages, right? Because, for example, if we have package A that needs Svelte 5, we'll need to bundle that in with that pull request. And then that package had to be in there because the previous package we used didn't work. It doesn't work with Svelte 5, but it works with our current application. So we couldn't just do Svelte 5 then that package. So we would try and do trunk-based development with reason, right? So it's always software development with common sense. But yeah, coming back to this, what we will do is we'll try and split our pull requests into like a we'll call it migration or upgrade, pre-upgrade, and the upgrade itself, and maybe post-upgrade. So one example is with the Prettier library, we're able to upgrade the Prettier library to the latest version. we could do that before adding in Svelte 5. So that made that pull request a bit smaller. Some other examples were changes to, I think, how Svelte 5 compiled its script. So, for example, you couldn't have TDs and TRs as bare anymore. You had to wrap them in a T head and a T body. And there's a link to the actual explanation why that's the rationale. And you can see it here. If I uncomment this, you can't have a TR, it just won't compile. The same goes for, I believe, self-closing tags. It might compile, but generally if you have a self-closing tag, we'll throw a warning. And for our application, what we did was we'll just fix these because we could still, this is still compatible with Svelte 4. We'll be able to include those changes before having to do our big migration to Svelte 5. And that helped minimize the size of the pull request, able to do small PRs, test the application as well, made it easier to test the application. If there are any bugs, we can roll back a lot easier rather than rolling back a huge pull request. And these are the kind of strategies we took. Another thing we did was, even though the Svelte 4 syntax is compatible with Svelte 5, we made some changes changes to our own code, existing code. And if you go down here, there's obviously runes, which is the big one. There's snippet syntax as well. Over here, snippet syntax and getting rid of slot for render. So what we did was we created pull requests showcasing these changes. And for team members who aren't involved in the upgrade, they can kind of look through the pull request and see this is the change, because you can still write Svelte 4, but ideally we want to be able to write Svelte 5 going forward and then slowly migrate Svelte 4, components of Svelte 4 into Svelte 5. And the way to do that is we create a little wiki linking obviously the migration, some changes like, for example, you can't do TDs or TRs anymore as bare and self-closing tags, just to not do that. And we also included a pull request to show changes like how state works, how derived works, how effect works. And that helps the transition make it a bit smoother. So try and knock off those negatives of upgrading, because obviously small PRs reduce the risk or spread the risk out multiple PRs. And doing a pull request or writing a wiki showing the changes helps the team transfer the knowledge to the rest of the team. So in summary, it's always good to reflect on what we've done. So ideally in the book Refactoring as well, what Martin Fowler kind of talks about in the beginning is refactoring shouldn't be like, you shouldn't just work on a feature and then spend time refactoring. Refactoring kind of should be included throughout the entire kind of sprint cycle. So if you're building a new feature, always refactor beforehand. It helps you kind of fix bugs. It helps you, and that's what we've done. We found bugs in our application, that undiscovered bugs in our application, but it allows you to understand what's going on much better, and you can prepare yourself to build the feature much better. It does delay the delivery of the feature, but I think it's probably a good kind of long-term strategy to do. That's something I'll probably try and push for is, trying to update your application frequently, trying to maintain, be up to date frequently. And upgrading was actually really good for us as a team. It made us read the documentation a lot more. We were reading change logs. We were staying up to date. It kind of gave us a better idea of how things worked as well, rather than it being a black box. So it kind of improved us as skills as developers. And I think if we try and stick to the status quo, you're not changing, then you kind of you're not improving, right? You always want to be continually improving. So I think that's it's been a good experience for us. And yeah, obviously reading documentation, reading change logs. And I think going forward, it's always about communication, right? It's coming back to what I talked about before with upgrading, being so difficult in a business. There's a video that talk that I'm really inspired by Bert B, given at the Svelte Summit. There was somewhere in the talk where he talked about how, because he had to migrate the website for his business from whatever they were using to Svelte 5, and that obviously involved discussion, communication, influence within the company, and that's where you got to think. He talked about how everyone in the business wants the business to do well. Everyone wants the website to do well. No one's against you, but the problem comes in we all have different ideas on how we want to approach that. And obviously his idea was to migrate to Svelte 5. Some other people in the business would be against that, so that's kind of this video kind of gave me hope, and that's why I wrote this blog post as well, because I think upgrading is important. And you might think that you're a blocker to the business for wanting to upgrade because you should be focusing on features and not rocking the boat too much. But I think these things matter. And if you're surrounded by people who are rational and are willing to listen, then you should always keep fighting for these things, like being able to upgrade, wanting to upgrade, staying up to date and refactoring. In this video, this talk gave me quite a lot of inspiration for that as well. But yeah, that's kind of my experience on upgrading from Svelte 4 to Svelte 5 is quite a big upgrade for us, and we learned a lot. So I'm hoping you learned a lot from this kind of video and blog post. If you like this kind of content, this is the first time I'm doing this, kind of writing a blog post and talking about it. If you've got any advice or tips, let me know. And yeah, thanks for listening and have a good day.